Hi, I'm Sean, the Teen Librarian here at the Palm Springs Public Library, and this is the Among Us felt craft / keychain. In your kit, you've got some fluff, not even this much, but you do just for visual purposes. You have fluff and 3 pieces of felt. You have your larger piece with the color, which will be the color of your crewmate. This will be for 2 pieces. You have a gray piece and a white piece, which will be used to make the visor. You also have a cardstock cutout and some thread, a little sewing kit I put together, some thread and a needle, as well as a keychain part. And that is going to make our Among Us keychain. Also, somewhere in this video, I'll say the secret word, which you'll need for Beanstack. So once you're done with this craft, you can go onto Beanstack, enter in that secret word, and get this week's badge, as well as a grand prize entry ticket. I've got all my stuff ready. Let's get going. All right, let's get started. So the first thing you're gonna do is take your templates and go ahead and cut them out. Okay, so these are your templates, and just briefly, these are this right here where the text is. This is the front of your template. So if you imagine just looking at the keychain once it's finished, this is going to be your colored piece. Obviously, this is the first part of the glass on the front, and then this is the second part that goes right on top. So one thing I would recommend doing, because next what we're going to do is trace it onto our felt. One thing I would recommend doing is actually when you trace it is to trace the other side of it. So that way when you trace with a marker, any leftover marked spots are actually won't show up in your final exterior of the craft. So for now, go ahead and trace. So remember, one thing, you're going to trace 2 of the color. So in this case, I'm doing pink, and then 1 each of gray and white. Okay, and there you go. So one thing to keep in mind is when you're working with the Sharpie, especially on felt, you want to be careful not to press too hard or stay on the felt too long. So as you can see, this isn't a perfect trace by any means. It's still, there's some faint spots here, and that's okay, because we're going to kind of we'll figure out where to cut, and we've avoided bleeding through the other side. So now what you're going to do is cut out your templates. Excuse me, cut out your felt. And there we go. We've got all of our felt pieces cut out, and of course this with the black outline still visible in some parts. You can tell that this is the back of what we're sewing. So in a moment here, we're essentially just going to flip it and be ready to go. You want to trim, you may have to trim as you go, but you want to get as much, doesn't have to be perfect, but you do want to get as much of the black out just so you can, just so the proportions stay right. Again, this is about as much as you need to do. So, okay, so I've threaded the white thread, and I'm going to be stitching the white onto the gray to make the visor. So just as a point of reference, the white felt is going to represent this reflection up top, and the gray felt is going to represent the dark background of that reflection. So to achieve that, what I'm going to do is put the white felt, to the top and slightly to the front, or to the right, if you will, of the gray felt. And I've threaded my white thread. Advice for threading: if you have a threader, use it. If not, just very carefully get it through the eye of the needle. The finer the cut is on the thread, the easier it will be to go in. I'm going to line this up again to the top and to the front, and I'm going to start here on the front, going through both pieces. And since we're only sewing the white to the gray, meaning that we're going around the perimeter of the white, then I'm going to go ahead and do, I'm going to go under and then through. Okay, now that I've gotten back to the starting point, I'm going to go ahead and tie these up. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and sew the visor onto the front. When you're sewing, you're going to want to make sure that you keep it straight as you go. So you just keep an eye on your pieces and just make sure they're staying in place as you go around. All right, with those, now that I'm back at the beginning, I'm going to go ahead and knot this one. And go ahead and snip that. All right, there we've got the face of our crewmate, looking pretty good. And next we're going to thread the black thread and get started on putting these two together. All right, so remember our starting point is going to be back here on the back leg. We're going to go around here, and once we get to the top, if we choose to do the keychain, which I am for this, we're going to sew the keychain loop here, and then going to continue to about here and then start stuffing it. Then we'll get most of it, get all of it stuffed by then. And then we're going to stitch the backpack area, for lack of a better term, and then do a line up the back of the backpack to give this some definition. All right, I'm going to get started. I've gotten to the top of the crewmate's head, so now it's time to put the keychain in. So I'm going to set up the hoop here in the top and then sew through it, and I'm going to go through it a couple of times. One thing I would recommend doing is when you're about to put the keychain loop in is put your needle through the top layer of the felt, and then put the small hoop of the keychain, and then put your needle through the back layer of the felt, the second piece of your felt. Stitch that through, and now I'm going to loop it through the top, and I'm probably going to do this 3 or 4 times. Alright, now the keychain is in, and I can continue with the stitching. Alright, so now I'm ready to go ahead and stuff the crewmate. So I'm just going to take the stuffing and just bit by bit pull some out, and we're going to put it in there, and also we're going to make sure we need to fill in the legs. And you don't want to overdo it. It's easy to overdo it, but you don't want to overdo it. You don't need this much. And if you have something that you can use to gently push it into the smaller spaces, like the legs, I recommend using that. All right, I've got this stuffed to the point where I want it. Now remember, what we're doing for the last part of the sewing is we are going to make sure the stuffing is not in the backpack area, this area here. And so to do that, when we get over here, we're going to make sure we continue stuffing this into the body of the crewmate. So I'm going to continue stitching. just a quick pro tip. Just discovered this. This keychain is dangling and getting in the way. So I'm just gonna take a small piece of tape and just tape it to the back. And that's gonna hopefully keep it in place so it doesn't get in the way of my stitching. Okay, now we're getting to the end of our stitching. We've gotten back to our starting point. So I'm going to do two things. One, I'm going to sew this back down to the back end, tie a knot with the anchor with the start of this, and then I'm going to go up the side here just to give it the impression of the backpack. So first, go ahead and stitch through. Ahead and knot this. Okay, and now I'm ready to stitch up the middle here, not middle, but down the back of the Crewmate to give that, again, that impression of the backpack. Also, the secret word for Beanstack for this craft is Crewmate. One word, C-R-E-W-M-A-T-E, Crewmate, as in your crewmate. You're not the imposter. So go ahead and put that in Beanstack when you finish this so you can get your participation badge and your grand prize entry ticket. All right, let's sew up the back here. All right, now I've got the back part finished, so I'm gonna go ahead and knot this one off and be finished. So what I'm gonna do is put this through here. And just stitch over the edge and create a couple of knots. So do that maybe a couple of times. If you get stuck anywhere, just keep in mind you can just trim off any of the excess black thread. And I've tied off my knots there. So I'm gonna go ahead and trim this. And also trim the first one back here. And there we go. There is our Among Us Crewmate keychain.